joking and enjoying themselves. The local police attempted to exert some sort of control outside the pub by erecting temporary barriers, but it was the weekend, the Hastings was the only licensed premises in the area, and the sheer number of customers was simply unmanageable. Nothing draws a crowd like the chance to learn details of a tragedy. The visitors had come to try to discover what was happening literally beneath their feet. 3 days earlier, between 10 and 11 in the morning of the 16th of January 1862, the second shift of the day had assembled for work at the colliery in the next-door village of New Hartley. The newly arrived miners were due to take over from what was called the fore-shift, which had begun work in the middle of the night. Like most changeovers, it was to take place underground to save time and money for the mine operators, who did not wish to pay men for the time they spent being dropped in cages down the mine shaft and then walking or crawling along underground passages to the face where they were expected to chip away. The pit had been sunk over 15 years beforehand and had been an unlucky place from the start. Its predecessor had been closed in the 1840s because it kept flooding. But the mine produced good steam coal, and its newly rich owner, Charles Carr, all sideburns and waistcoat and with what was said to be the tallest top hat in the county, believed that with a big enough steam pump to drain water from the pit, the coal could be extracted and sold. The machine made for him was one of the most powerful in the entire northeast coalfield, and built by one of the heavy engineering firms which had developed on the banks of the Tyne in the wake of the coal trade. The main cylinder of the beam engine was over 7 feet across, pushing up and down an enormous horizontal girder over 34 feet long, made of cast iron and weighing 42 tons. Shortly before 11 that morning, with a tremendous shattering noise, it broke in two. Part of the beam, perhaps weighing over 20 tons, fell down the shaft, which was the only way into and out of the mine. The accident had occurred at the worst possible time, when the maximum number of men were underground for the shift change. It would have been easier to manage a rescue had there been, as existed at other pits, 2 mine shafts. But the owners had followed local practice and sunk only 1 shaft into the earth, about 12 feet across. The shaft was divided in 2 all the way down by a timber partition or brattice to allow the usual mining ventilation system, in which clean air could reach the men underground through a downdraft, while a fire was kept burning low down on the upcast side to draw in the foul air of the mine and release it to the surface. If the single shaft became blocked for any reason, as now happened, tragedy would surely follow. That morning a cage was being raised to the surface. Inside were 8 men who had just finished their shift, doubtless pleased to be the first to have completed their time underground. When they were about halfway to the surface, they heard a terrifying crack, followed by a roar, as the broken beam careered down the hole. Debris dislodged from the walls of the shaft and bits of lift machinery struck the cage, snapping 2 of its 4 supporting cables. 4 of the men inside the ungated cage were thrown out and plunged into the darkness below, as rock, metal, and timber rained down upon them. The remaining miners knew their friends would not survive the fall. The massive beam continued its descent down the shaft, dislodging rock, rubble, and heavy timbers as it fell. The rocks, rubble, and rubbish then jammed across the shaft, blocking access to 2 of the 3 seams of coal. 204 men and boys were now trapped underground. The fatal accident at Hartley Colliery sounds extraordinary to the modern ear. The Hartley disaster was bigger than most, but Britain had by this time a barely satisfiable appetite for coal, and it was fed at a terrible price in human suffering. For over 400 years the fuel of a nation and empire was dogged with accident. "Close the coal-house door, lad," sang the Tyneside radical Alex Glasgow 100 years later. "There's blood inside." Perhaps there were years when no one died trying to get coal out of the ground, but they were exceptional.